What?
Right, we'll call our September 12th meeting to order. I'd like to welcome all of y'all in attendance as we partake Macon County's business this evening. We're going to start off with announcements. I think we have an NCACC video. Check on that.
Maybe not. Did you get the man?
Stand before you as president. As I plan for this coming year, it is clear that there is much to be done to continue the great work of the association. Together, we'll make this a great year, one for the history book. As I said before, my goal as president make this a very eventful year, and I believe we're off to a good start. This is a historic moment for our association because it's the first time we've ever held a board meeting outside the state of North Carolina.
Together as a one state, as 100 counties, working together from across, from east to west, from the mountains to the city.
And I think it's important that we've given our lobbying staff a clear direction of where we want to go and what we want them to relate to the General Assembly, because that's what they do for us. And after this process, I think they have a very clear direction on where we go as an association.
Approximately 10:15 p.m. on Thursday, March 16th, fire broke out at a construction site adjacent to the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners offices located in the Albert Coates Local Government Center and the Quorum Center in Wake County.
we owe it to our citizens to become involved in this process. And we as an association here, and I as the president, have initiated a forum, a leadership forum, that we're going to take to each one of the counties. I am Fred Ford, and I am president of the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners. When I was elected in August of this past year, I chose as my initiative mental health, substance abuse, with an emphasis on the opioid epidemic.
The state legislature adjourned its 2017 session in the early morning hours of Friday, June the 30th, but with plans to return sooner than typical. And normally, they wouldn't come back until next spring for a short session.
I told the folks in the General Assembly, I said, if you want to see an organization should work, it's made up of Democrats and Republicans. Because we do that job, and we do it very well, and we do it every time we meet. I learned that you gotta be able to laugh, you gotta be able to laugh at yourself. Nothing so serious as you can't laugh.
Thanks so much for joining us today.
Great. I thought you were going to say something else. Okay.
Peter, thanks for joining us today. What are the new developments happening at the General Assembly this week?
Jim and Sarah. Yeah.
Guess that's it.
That's good.
You just got asked the wrong question.
All right. Well, we're under announcements. I don't think it's any surprise to anyone in here from the updates we've been getting from our emergency services director that Highlands took a pretty big hit last night with the storms that came through. And Chris, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you to step up and give us a little update on what's happening with waste disposal in Warren. If you don't mind, I know we've been getting some emails, but if you don't mind giving us just a few seconds on what y'all are seeing and what you know moving forward, we'd appreciate it.
Sure. Obviously, we're still having some impacts from the hurricane, especially in the highlands and Scaly Mountain areas. Most of Macon County actually fared really well. The most significant effects were felt obviously in those elevations above 3,000 to 4,000 feet, particularly along the Blue Ridge Plateau there where the elevation changes are very significant. We still have, as of about 5:30, about 8,000 folks that are without electrical service. Last night we had some fairly major road arteries that were shut down due to fallen trees, power lines, and miscellaneous issues, but all those are back open. There's going to be debris issues that you're going to have to deal with on the roadways. You may have some isolated areas that are still going to have trees involved. We only have one minor injury that we're aware of. Our damage assessment folks actually went out today, and I haven't looked at all of those numbers yet, but the ones that so far we looked at look like there are two very seriously damaged structures and at least three that have somewhere in moderate to minor damage, and then a lot of other smaller issues, particularly across that region. We weren't alone. Macon, Jackson, the Casher sections, part of Henderson, a little bit of Buncombe, some of those areas down on this side of the world there on the borders. That's where we got the brunt of it, but we fared pretty well. We've been in contact with the folks at the town of Highlands, particularly Lamar Nix, Josh Ward, making sure that they had what they needed. We actually we had a North Carolina Forest Service chainsaw crew task force we requested to be sent in today, and we finished what we needed with them, and we actually sent them to the town so they could try and work on some of their issues as safely as they could with the power line down. But we're making some fairly decent progress, and we've fared fairly well countywide. Highlands and Scaly Mountain might not necessarily agree with that, but they took the brunt of it this time.
Good. Thanks, Warren.
Thank you, Will.
As Warren said, most of what we're facing at this point is vegetative debris from trees across the road, trees down. We are opening, we will be opening tomorrow a temporary disaster debris storage and disposal site, not disposal, storage and processing site on Foreman Road in Highlands. We have a second site in Highlands that is ready to go should the first site get overrun. It's actually probably going to be a few more days. Like Warren said, the town and DOT, et cetera, in that area are still in the cut and clear phase. So it'll be probably a few days before they get into the removal phase. But we'll be there and we'll be up and running, and we'll have that ready to take in that debris and get it managed and dealt with in a timely fashion. We probably in the next couple of days, I'll of course keep in contact with Warren with regards to opening a site in Franklin. Just kind of getting a lay of the land of the level of need for a vegetative debris site down here, and we're still trying to negotiate with the property owner to let us back in. So should hear back from them tomorrow. Obviously, we have other locations we can go to if the primary one doesn't pan out, but we'll have that up before the end of the week.
Good. Chris, can you, I appreciate both of y'all's efforts with this, by the way. I've been in contact with both of you, and very proud to have you both working with Macon County. Chris, can you give us a little update? So if a homeowner has debris down in their yard, can anybody take it to this site, or is it just the town, or how does that work?
No. Anybody can bring their vegetative debris. Obviously, it needs to be storm-related debris. If there's an old brush pile or pile of leaves or grass clippings, we're probably going to reject that. But yeah, and basically for folks that are unfortunately suffer damage beyond vegetative debris, that cannot go to these sites. They're not going to be open for non-vegetative debris. People just need to treat that as normal. They need to bring it to the landfill in Franklin or the transfer station in Highlands. Normal fees apply, etc. But they need to hold on to those receipts for their insurance company or any state or federal help that comes through to get reimbursed individually. We actually can't get reimbursed for that, but they can on an individual basis. We can't on a public basis.
All right, thank you.
Thank you,
Wes.
Thank you for all you do. Thank you.
I just got a text that Highland School's on a 3-hour delay tomorrow with limited bus service. So.
Could I have another 30 seconds for a completely different announcement?
Chris? Sure.
Thank you. I just wanted to announce, some of you may remember that I am just about to stop being the president of NC SWANA. Just wanted to let y'all know we are hosting a special conference this fall, and the key is it's back to basics. We're going to talk about very general, basic categories of what it means to run a solid waste department in this day and age, regulatory, funding-wise, etc. We're going to have the association, the league, school of government, etc. making presentations. This is a conference I've been wanting to put on for a while, and I kept getting kicked back. So since it was my last one as president, I just didn't take a vote, and so we're doing it. But the key to why I'm bringing that up to you guys is that for each registrant, a solid waste professional registrant that would normally come, they are going to be able to bring a county manager or an elected official to the conference at no charge. So just putting a bug in your ear. If any of you have a desire to learn more about solid waste enterprise funds and why my tipping fees are what they are and why I do business the way I do business, let me know, and we'll save you a spot.
Good. Where is it?
It's in Raleigh.
Raleigh.
To get all those people, I had to put it in Raleigh. So.
When is it?
It is. That's a very good question. It's actually October 31st through November 2nd.
I know it is. We got a trick or treat.
I know. I felt like we would all just go over to Franklin Street and Chapel Hill and watch, just people watch. But some people have been near Franklin Street on Halloween and know what that means. Because we know that you guys don't have access. The conference is 2.5 days. You're invited for 2.5 days, but we're really going to try to focus the stuff that would most benefit elected leaders and town managers on Tuesday, so that if you can only make it for the day, you'll get most of what we brought you there for. Wednesday and Thursday we'll focus more on operational best management practices and things. So.
Association does their thing on Wednesday. Association,
That's what.
they have their program on Wednesday.
With us?
They have part of the program on Wednesday. I've got a
us?
note that said that.
They told me they need to be there Tuesday. Yeah, stick around for Wednesday.
Yeah.
Apparently that's when the association will be here. I'll get an
Okay.
update from my folks tomorrow on how bad I've missed the mark here.
Thanks,
Thank
Chris.
you for
Thank you.
letting me let y'all know that.
Good. Any further announcements, Mr. Manager? Commissioner Shields, Bill?
The Macon County Fair starts tomorrow at 1 o'clock. The opening ceremonies. Of course, it'll go through Saturday night. And we'd invite everybody out to Macon County Fair. We think this year that it's probably the largest fair that we've had in a long, long time. In every category. If everything holds true, looks like the weather's going to be nice. We don't see no hurricanes in sight, maybe. And so we encourage everybody to come out.
Good. Thank you. Anybody else? No. All right. If we'll all rise and observe a moment of silence, then I'll ask Commissioner Shields to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I don't have no public comment. Anybody here like to address us? No?
Down, dress us down.
Going once, going twice? Sold? All right. Additions to agenda. I think I have one item we're going to add under appointments under 13B, community funding pool. It's the only item I have. Anything else, Mr. Jones?
Chairman, got contacted by John Fay yesterday with housing, and he had requested that we prepare a satisfaction of security interest in connection with a deed of trust under one of the housing program projects. I have prepared that, distributed a copy to each of you by email and a hard copy tonight. We just need the board to take that matter up and authorize the satisfaction of the deed of trust.
Thank you. We'll add that as new business 11E. Anything else, Mr. Manager? Anything from you?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I would like to remove item number 10D, the burn building property appraisal, from the agenda. We have performed the survey and received the appraisal, and Southwestern Community College is in the process of getting their appraisal now.
Okay.
I just felt like it would be better if we could present those together and have a discussion on that at the same time.
Good deal. Thank you.
And also, if we could add an item under old business A1, which would be budget amendment 49, and in doing that I would like to pull Budget Amendment 49 from the consent agenda. Again, we've discussed this previously. And in doing that, I would like to make what is now A on old business, item number A2. And under reports and presentations, I would like to give an update to the board on the evaluation of the Highlands TDC and Chamber, as well as the Franklin Nantahala TDC and Chamber of Commerce.
Is that it, now that you've thoroughly confused me? No, I'm just kidding.
I do apologize.
No, you're good. You're good. Anybody else?
Mr. Chairman, I would request a very short
Okay.
closed session for the purpose of discussing matters protected by the attorney-client privilege.
And if we could also too add Ms. Sarah Graham from the Sarah Thompson from the Southwestern Commission to reports and presentations as well.
Good
That
deal.
would be 9B.
Welcome, Sarah.
That's about all the damage I can do, Mr. Chairman.
Anybody else?
We have 9C, just a quick update on our visit to Nantahala. Commissioner Shields and myself will make it brief.
All right. Anybody else? All right. We've taken a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Well, moving right along to reports and presentations. Derek, we'll start out with you, the TDC Chamber update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you'll recall, the TDC and our Chambers of Commerce is something that has recently received some media attention, and it's something that Mr. Jones and I had the opportunity to visit with both the Franklin Nantahala TDC and Chamber representatives, as well as the Highlands TDC and Chamber representatives. And these meetings stemmed in response to questions that were coming from the community regarding the functions and the operation of each of our local TDCs and chambers. I'd requested for Mr. Jones to pull out the governing documents and accompany me to each of these bodies and kind of evaluate them. And it was to be a checkup, if you will. It's similar to your annual physical with your doctor. We did not add to, change, or take away from anything that was contained in the governing documents for these bodies. We simply wanted to make sure that the chambers and TDCs were aware of the language and understood the parameters that language set forth for them as they were performing the functions invested in them. This was a very positive experience. I feel like Mr. Jones can attest it was a learning experience for everyone around the table as we went through these governing documents, as many of them predate, or as they all predate, both mine and Mr. Jones' time in Macon County, as well as many of the members on the Chamber and TDC boards' times there as well. And today we concluded our meetings as we attended the TDC meeting for Franklin Nantahala. Mr. Shields was there. And as we concluded this process, and as I reflected back on it, I can say without hesitation that the continued sales tax growth that we see, including we received the year-end sales tax report today, and we're up nearly 9% this fiscal year over last fiscal year in sales tax. Aside from sales tax, when you look at the recognition that Macon County has received lately in a regional level or at a state level, even at the national level, I can't help but appreciate the hard work and dedication of the men and women that serve on these TDC and chamber boards. Their efforts, I feel like, have been and will continue to be the train that drives tourism in Macon County forward. And the recommendations that were given to them from Mr. Jones and myself did not come were not intended to change the course of this train. It was merely to grease the wheels and make sure that everything that were contained in the governing documents for each of those bodies were clearly understood and were clearly being followed as they moved forward in the appropriation of funds in Macon County. And I think, aside from the learning experience and everybody getting on the same page, it was a wake-up call to me that as a governing board, we need to be abiding by, and all the boards and committees that we touch, we owe it to the citizens of Macon County to be sure that we're operating as closely to those governing documents as possible. And again, it was a very fruitful and positive experience, and glad I got to take part in it and get a better idea of what each of these bodies do. And we're very fortunate in Macon County to have such dedicated public servants.
All right, thank you, Mr. Manager. Ms. Sarah Thompson, coming up with the Southwestern Commission.
Good evening.
Welcome.
Yeah,
Sarah.
Commissioners, staff, public. Thanks for a few minutes of your time tonight. I think this is my second annual report since I became director, but it's something I plan on doing, is coming to you once a year and talking a little bit about the commission, presenting our most recent annual report. Of course, I'm always happy to come another time if there's an issue that comes up that we can be of any assistance with. So tonight I brought our 2016 annual report, and I also brought the NC Tomorrow plan. Y'all may be familiar with the SEDS document that we create, which is the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy for the region. We do that as part of our partnership with the U.S. Economic Development Administration. And in fact, at our board meeting later this month on September 25th, we'll be asking our board to approve the SEDS. The NC Tomorrow plan is all of the COGs, councils of government across the state, sort of compiled their economic development strategies into a statewide document. So I thought you might be interested in seeing that. So those are the two documents that I brought tonight. So as you know, the Southwestern Commission is the council of government for Region A, the 7 western counties in North Carolina, and the 17 municipalities within. We've been in service to the region for 52 years, since 1965. We're called COGs in North Carolina, Councils of Government, but organizations like mine exist all across the country. They're called planning commissions, economic development districts, something like that, but they exist in all the states in the country. And they were created in the mid-60s when a lot of federal aid programs were put into place that brought aid to local governments and to local issues, and it was determined that passing those funds through a regional organization made the most sense. So that's how we were born back in the 60s. And we've been running basically the same programs ever since. We work in 3 main departments. The Area Agency on Aging is the federal funding from the Older Americans Act, and the Workforce Department is federal funding from the Workforce Innovation and Opportunities Act. So both of those federal funds have been around since the late 60s, early 70s. They sometimes have different names depending on the administration in charge, but they've been around as long as we have. And we're largely a pass-through agency, so those funds come from the feds to the state adds their amount, they come to the region, you all add your amount, and then we contract with agencies in the region that provide those services. Our 3rd department is planning and economic development, so that's where I get to know a lot of local elected officials, because we do a lot of grant writing for infrastructure projects, community planning when requested by our local governments to assist with community planning, group facilitation, anything that y'all need that we provide, that's what that department does. So Our dues are and have been 75 cents per capita for a really long time. In a region with 200,000 people, that raises, in the range of $150,000, which we then use to leverage those federal funds, totaling a $6 million budget, the vast majority of which gets passed through to our communities. So, as an example of how that works for you all, you pay about $22,000 a year in dues to the commission, and just in aging services alone, that brings in over $340,000 of federal funds for aging services.
Pretty good investment.
It is. The workforce stuff, you're all familiar with the NC Works Career Centers. They've been different names over the years. Again, different administrations like to change the names, but the services are still the same. So I think before it was NC Works Career Centers, it was JobLink. Some people still think of them as the Employment Security Commission or the Unemployment Office, but it's essentially the place where everyone should go if they're seeking employment or training, or they've been displaced by a layoff. And so we have a lot of funding in those centers as well. A couple things I wanted to tell you about that are sort of new or specific or outside of what I already spoke about. I've been talking about the Mountain West Partnership for a couple of years now, but I want to keep it on your radar. When the state reorganized economic development, you'll remember Advantage West used to cover the western 27 counties, I think, and that was a state-funded economic development agency that was supposed to promote Western North Carolina for economic development. When that went away, all the economic developers in Region A and a lot of the local elected officials as well really felt the need to replace that effort in our own region. So the commission has administered and raised funds and managed this new economic development partnership for the 7 western counties. That's highlighted in our annual report, and it's a really good website with a resource directory for entrepreneurs and business owners. Anybody who is looking to do business in our region could find a lot of information there that they needed and get pointed towards the county they were interested in. So Mr. Jenkins, your economic developer, is on that board of directors, and I think it's going really well. We're also, I've spoken with Commissioner Shields about this, and your manager, of course. We're doing a regional broadband assessment. The commission has historically been an infrastructure agency. We've raised a lot of funds over the years for things like water and sewer and other basic infrastructure. We recognize that broadband is the infrastructure issue of this era, so we are attempting to help move the needle a little bit in Region A. Because broadband is not a public service and there are legislative barriers in North Carolina to the public sector getting involved, it's a little bit of a different process than we've been used to in the past. But we have contracted with a consultant whose team specializes in these types of projects, going into North Carolina and working with rural communities and figuring out how to crack the nut on this rural broadband issue. So your broadband committee in the county will be involved in this project. All 7 counties now have a broadband committee. Y'all were one of the first, so cheers on that. Good job. But it's going to start off fairly soon with a survey. And now a lot of people feel like we've already done a ton of surveys. We're going to over-survey the public. But really, to get a true regional assessment, we really need to get a lot of responses to this tool that we're going to be using regionally. So that's one thing I would ask of you, is when you see that come across your email, to please spread it amongst your contacts and network. And it's called aggregating demand. And I know y'all did a pretty robust survey, which is in the hands of the consultant. We are not going to ignore any work that's already been done. The other step in this short 3-month phase that we're in right now in December will be training for the region's broadband committees on what we can and can't do, public-private partnership models, legislation, funding, just trying to get the whole region on the same page as far as how we can make some progress in this last mile broadband. Last mile, middle mile, the terminology is essentially, I like to remind people that although we are a rural region, we're very blessed with a very strong middle mile infrastructure with the Balsam West ring that goes around our region. So now we have to figure out how to incent private providers to come into areas where the return on investment won't be huge. It's probably going to involve some money on the table that we provide, and I'm hoping that as we go through this process, perhaps some federal or state funding will come available to help rural communities build some infrastructure. So that's where we are with that. I'll keep you updated. Also, a couple of you came where we've been doing COG orientations once a year after elections. It's my attempt to get you all better oriented to our agency before your first budget meeting comes along and you see our line item and wonder why we're there. So as I send notices out about that, I hope you'll take the opportunity to come. But anytime that you want to sit down and talk to me about the commission, I'm available. Please just ask. Finally, last thing, the same day as our next board meeting, September 25th, Napoleon Wallace, who is the new Pat Mitchell, which only means something to you if you worked with Pat, but he's the Assistant Secretary for the North Carolina Department of Commerce for Rural Economic Development, and he'll be visiting our region that day. I will send your manager the specific information, but he's a good guy to know, holds the purse strings on a lot of state funds, and a really nice guy. We're going to be holding 2 sessions for him to meet leaders in the region on September 25th. So I think the one closest to y'all will be in Silva at 9 a.m. that morning, but I'll send Derek the information. So I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Sarah, I just want to say I appreciate what you've done for Macon County. You put us on the map. You've given us direction, and I just want to say personally thank you, and I hope these people here understand the role that you play within our region.
Well, thank you. I've said it in my letter in the annual report, but I really believe it, which is that all the federal programs are great and they bring a lot of money into the region, but I think the best thing about the Southwestern Commission is that it gives you all a regional voice and a way to work with your neighbors. And one thing I've realized since taking the director's position, of course I've been with the commission about 7 years, but our region has a reputation across the state for being really tight and working well together. And so I'm very proud of that, and I think y'all deserve the credit for that. So.
Thank you, Sarah, for all you do.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sarah.
Oh, and we are convening quarterly mayor's meetings now, and there's one tonight in Franklin, so I'm going to excuse myself and go join some of the region's mayors for tonight.
We wish we could go with you, but we'll stay.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm good, thank you. Update on the visit to Nantahala, Commissioner Higdon and Commissioner Shields.
Just briefly, at the request of some of the Nantahala residents, Commissioner Shields, Warren Caden, County Manager, we went over and spent half a day with them in Nantahala. Those folks never asked for anything. We never send them a whole lot of money back, the tax dollars, but looked at the library, went to the school, looked at the library, community building, and Mr. Shields, everybody confirmed, when you go to the bathroom in the community building, the roof's leaking, it's time to do something. So then we visited Rec Park, the EMS building. Most of the county facilities in Nantahala. Like we told them in our meeting is whatever they're requesting, we'll identify the need, but nothing's going to happen tomorrow. And I hope that we can coordinate. We have some definitive things we'd like to do in Nantahala, I think, but it ought to be worked into our CIP plan. And I think Derek says that's shaping up pretty good. Or how do we integrate? Will there be an opportunity for those of us who identify needs to integrate that into the plan?
The way we've envisioned the CIP process working, and as it is currently unfolding, we have had 2 meetings with the department heads. One where our consultant with Davenport, who is working alongside of us in this CIP, has came and met with us and the department heads, kind of went over the process, what was to be expected, passed out the documents that will be the documents that the projects are submitted on, went over them, and we set at that meeting a date for all those projects identified by Macon County department heads to be submitted on October 2nd. We then had a follow-up meeting last week, just to another chance to sit down with the department heads to make sure that the process was going smoothly for everyone, that no one had any questions, and again reminded them open door policy where they can communicate with Lori or myself or the consultants to get their project forms filled out and to get those submitted. In addition to that, I've also met with Dr. Baldwin as well as Dr. Thomas, and also provided them with the project forms for the CIP, and went over that process with each of them as they will have projects submitted as well. When we get those projects from the outside agencies and the department heads that they have identified, I then envision that process coming to the board, and the board having an open discussion, reviewing each of the priorities that we're able to gather from the department heads and outside agencies. And at that time, the board will discuss each of your priorities, as well as go through those priorities, add to, take away from, or change as the board sees fit, and before we finalize that CIP document.
Thank you.
I think the one other thing we got to do, having been in that principal position, when the leadership group comes into your school, we got to meet the new principal. And
Briefly, yeah.
yeah, and that was, I'm sure it made him nervous, but at the same time it enlightened him. We're glad to have him in our community, and what job he'll do there. And it's just what we have here. There's 2 players here. There's the Fontana Library. You know, they're in this arena too. And I guess one of the things I think Mr. Higgin we talked about is to see what kind of resources the Fontana Library has that they can share with us to develop a CIP plan, or give some insight on how to upgrade, or how to make a media center in a community better, and if they have any resources for that. Was that some way you kind of talk about there, Dan?
Absolutely. That
Good
Nantahala
trip.
School's amazing. That's a clean, tight little building.
It is.
Those folks do a remarkable job. The rec park,
Yeah.
man, the rec park was just slick as a button. That sold the general.
Right. And down at Warren's place there, we had an opportunity to visit the EMT there, EMS, and likewise, everybody seems to care about what they have, and it was not an eye-opening thing, but it was refreshing to see that people do care about their taxpayers' money and dollars and stuff like that. But,
So we got to the solid waste sites, and Chris has already gone, but
yeah,
they look pretty rough, but he and I have talked about that.
yeah.
Thank you, Chairman, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Moving on to old business, item A1, budget amendment number 49, which has been removed from consent agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I made a mistake there. I was intending to make that B1 rather than A1.
Okay.
And just depending on how big of a deal it'll be to change the agenda, I can talk about it now with the board having that in mind.
If you want to keep it on B1, we'll be happy to.
Okay.
Yep. Nice for you to admit you do make a mistake every now and then.
Numbers. Yeah.
All right.
Goodness, we got
Item 10A, discussion regarding upcoming board meeting in Highlands. So you want to address this first? You want me to?
We're welcome to go ahead. I just envision kind of a reset, if we're going to do it next month or before the next meeting, to recess this one. So it would be sometime before our October meeting.
Just my thoughts and theory on it is we have done this in the past. I think you've been to a meeting in Highlands, correct? Commissioner Bill has. But I think it's good to involve them. They don't get down the mountain very often, and I think it's good for us to be seen up there and show that we have a meeting. Where I made a mistake as chairman, obviously as a rookie, was not putting this on our agenda at the beginning of the year. So now we're I'm perfectly fine with waiting until next year to do this, but if you gentlemen would mind recessing and having a different date, I'm comfortable with that too. I don't want to cause any hardship by any means.
Do you want to go ahead and open here and go to Highlands, or do you want to sit? We can change the time. We can.
Judge, do you have
that.
any recommendation on it?
Well, I think your options are, if you want to try to do it, say for within the next month, you can recess this meeting to a date, time, and location specific, or alternatively, if you want to do it on your regular meeting date, you could theoretically open the meeting here at 6 p.m. as you normally do, and 5 commissioners could go up the hill and meet you there. You wouldn't necessarily have to come down here to open that meeting.
Would that
We
be
put the meeting starting a little later, 7 o'clock.
7 o'clock probably?
Up to you,
Y'all
Mitchell.
seen a very long meeting? I have some Highlands issues that I would like to bring up when we're up there, but any no's? Does that work with everybody for our October meeting?
If we that's on the 10th. If you want to recess this meeting and do it on a special call meeting, I just have the regular meeting up there. We'll meet here at 6 o'clock, leave at 6:05, and
Be ready to go?
convene up there at 6:45.
Where are you planning to have it in?
Probably the same place. We'll probably have it actually at the community building, which is in the outfield of the ball field. It's where the town board holds their.
As long as it's in the county, it's proper.
Well, let's plan on that, and I need to make sure that building's available, and I'll follow up with that tomorrow. Get back with us. So thank y'all. All right. Do you want to do B1, the budget amendment?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And just to, as I get started out here, this budget amendment is essentially a contract that will be entered into between Macon County and the Office of State Budget Management for $100,000 to Macon County to be used for community purposes. Anything that we can spend this money on that will benefit the community. I'd like to say that this funding came about through Senator Davis, and there was money available actually in 16-17. We began having these discussions in July of 2016 about this money that was available, and he essentially said, listen, I would like to get $100,000 in funding for Macon County to be used for community purposes. And as the conversations progressed and spoke back and forth with Senator Davis and his office staff, we eventually started out as, hey, this would be great for the community funding pool. When we're thinking community purposes or community functions and touching those areas that in turn touch our community, we felt like it would be a great place to put those funds. As we got into the details and started reviewing the contract, we were, and I was under the assumption all along that the funds, that this $100,000 would come directly to Macon County, who could then simply put it in, if the board so desired, put it in the community funding pool, the monies that we already have, just stick it in that line item and move forward. Well, has anybody ever entered into a state contract? that wasn't the case. And as we started reviewing the documents, the contract was originally made between the Office of State Budget Management and the Community Funding Pool. That was the first hurdle. Is the Community Funding Pool is an advisory board. It's not a fiduciary. Therefore, it cannot accept funds in that manner. So once we got that hurdle overcame, we got the contract revised to be between the Office of State Budget Management and Macon County, who would then, as we thought, get the money and put it into those monies already appropriated for the community funding pool if the board so desires. As we started reading the terms and conditions of the contract, there was a few things that jumped out about these funds to us that were of great concern. And number one, and I'll just read some excerpts from these terms and conditions. The county would remain wholly responsible for the actions of the sub-grantees that were recipients of this money. So it says here, the recipient, which would be Macon County, shall be responsible for the performance of all subcontractors and subrecipients and shall not be relieved of any of the duties and responsibilities of this contract as a result of entering into subcontracts or subgrants. Additionally, if said recipient subgrants any funds pursuant to this contract, recipient shall submit a copy of its policies and/or procedures for monitoring subrecipients to the agency. Essentially, what would happen is if these monies were placed, they would be different than the $75,000 that we appropriate and grant to, or approve the granting to the different community organizations that apply to the nonprofit funding pool. What this would require would be an administrative function of Macon County to basically specifically administer each of the grants that they gave out. So if that was five community funding pool applicants, then basically our finance office would be administering and overseeing those funds for 5 different sub-grantees. If it was 10, they would be doing the same for 10. So it was creating some administration difficulties on the county, which we felt like would thereby reduce the efficiency and effectiveness of what our finance office is doing regarding our other operations currently. Also, we felt like that the most important thing here was that it would create, in putting this $100,000 in that pool, it would create inequity, because the way this is structured, all of the applicants to the community funding pool would not be eligible to receive funds from this $100,000. Any subcontracts, and I'm reading again from the terms and conditions, any subcontracts or subgrants entered into by the recipient with grant funds shall be subject to all conditions of this contract. In the insurance conditions of this contract, the subrecipients would have to have workers' compensation insurance, a minimum of $500,000, general commercial liability of $1 million, automobile liability insurance of $500,000. In these requirements, we felt many of these of the smaller agencies that would be applying to the community funding pool do not have these in place currently. So that was of some concern. Here again, just reading another excerpt to you, and yes, the one I just read, we felt like that while some of the people applying for these funds would be able to get these funds based on this, the ones that didn't have these insurances in place would not be capable to receive these funds. So that was an equity issue that gave us some concern, as all the subrecipients would not, we did not feel like would be on an equal playing field. Furthermore, all the subrecipients would have to be 501c3, and currently, the way it's structured, I know that some community organizations that we've provided funding to in the past that could be requesting this funding would not be set up as 501c3s. So again, felt like there would be some inequity there due to that. So in closing, we worked with the Office of State Budget Management, Senator Davis and his office, to have it structured to where this money would be given to Macon County and be used for community purposes by Macon County. In doing that, we felt like we could put these funds toward a project that would touch the whole community, and that all these groups and entities that may have otherwise not been able to accept this money could benefit from this money as we applied it to a use, and we could oversee the funds and oversee the funds that we're ultimately responsible for over the course of the project. So what we're proposing to do, if the board is in agreement with this, is to put these funds toward the Robert C. Carpenter building project. What that would do is, first of all, that project is a project that's used all the way from your local basketball leagues, your local Little League baseball teams, your veterans, your many of the community groups that hold meetings there, your senior games. Basically, a whole wide variety of the community could benefit from these funds in that way. And so the reason that I discussed this budget amendment is because if the board does move forward with authorizing me to enter into the contract to accept these funds, then if we put those toward that project, then that will influence the money that we would otherwise be appropriating from fund balance to do this project. And it's essentially, the money started out all along as Senator Davis was made aware of monies that were available, and he wanted to be sure that Macon County got those monies to be used for community purposes. And so with that, I'll entertain any questions and be more than happy to discuss this further. That was just, as Lori and I looked at it, that made the most logical sense of giving the most people, allowing the most groups to be able to benefit from those funds.
It makes sense.
So will the money be made available?
It's going to be made available in this budget year as soon as we sign that contract. Now, from the time the contract's signed to the time we get the money,
You don't have a clue.
It's a reimbursement basis. I think, if I'm remembering right, though, for July through September, I can report any expenditures that have occurred and go ahead and submit it, and I think they'll reimburse on a
But
quarterly basis.
you don't get the $100,000 all at one time.
No,
That's right. You don't.
but you get it as you turn in the quarterly reimbursement.
And if you don't submit it in time, there's a lot of ifs and buts and bats about this money. There's been a lot of confusion about this money. So spend it all at one time if you can.
Yeah, I think we should spend the majority of it in July, August, September.
Yeah, you
and
need
probably
to.
the rest of it in October.
Need to spend it all at one lick, all you can. If it's the way to do it, that's up to the board, but you need to spend it all to get it all at one lick. Don't do it in $10,000 increments, because it gets real confusing. I guess you found that out, but
I think that's maybe a good thought, to be able to apply that towards the Carpenter building. I can't help but think back to our conversation 10 minutes ago when we were talking about Nantahala doesn't always get monies, and Highland and Scaly. So when you talk about from a community funding, I think if we had folks from Nantahala and somebody other than Jimmy from Highlands here and somebody from Scaly, they might argue that spending that money at the Carpenter building might not benefit.
And again, going back to, that was just the county. Another thing that I'd like to point out in this is that, the state auditor shall have access to persons and records as a result of all contracts or grants entered into by state agencies or political subdivisions in accordance with the North Carolina General Statute. Additionally, as the state funding authority, the agency shall have access to persons record as a result of all contracts or grants entered into by state agencies or political subdivisions. And basically, that goes back to the administration, and we would essentially, if given to another agency, would be administering that grant for them, and we would be, and not saying that any agency is not up to snuff on bookkeeping or the records they keep or their accounting practices, but if the state auditor comes in and finds a problem with another agency, then first of all, the agency would have to be a 501c3, and if anything is amiss about what's done with that money or how the agency uses that money, then the county is going to ultimately be held liable for it. And I think the only behind our recommendation on that project was we already have a fund set up. We're already monitoring that fund. And we would have direct oversight and control over those funds in accordance with how we do our accounting. It's acceptable because of our audit and all the checks and balances that we have in place. So I think that in looking at distributing those funds to that project, we certainly weren't dismissing the other needs in the community. It was just, hey, this is an ongoing project. We have an accounting system established for this project. We're already administering this project, so we would just put this money directly toward that project that we're already overseeing and administering. That is, it just happened to be a community building. So that was that. And Lori, I mean, you can feel free to speak. Is that kind of, that was kind of the conversation.
And this meets the criteria. It services a cross section of the population. That's real important if you read that thing close.
And
it's got to meet the cross section of the population.
Go along with
the
Mr.
new
Clispy.
agreement. I'm sorry, Mr. Shields. Go ahead.
Go along with his thought though. If we get this 100,000, we're saving 100,000 that we can put up here, that we make an earmark to what you're talking about.
Exactly.
And not have to go through all the red tape. What Paul's talked about, what we've all talked about here this evening, we can remember there's $100,000 here that we can look to the CIP plan or what it may be, that we can work towards assisting Nantahala. Just remember that 100,000 is there.
Right.
And that might be, but we can have both things.
And that was what we looked at. There are many other notable things like we've mentioned and discussed here tonight, but with the strings and the terms and conditions put on this money, if we could administer it and our finance office have direct control and the knowing of where it's going, I mean, just as Mr. Shields said, that's freeing up $100,000 that would have otherwise been spent on the Carpenter building. That would be our money. That there are not these strings. The strings are not attached to that money like that.
And this is tax dollars that we're spending, that we're getting, so it's taking money out of the left pocket, putting it in the right pocket.
But this is tax dollars that was robbed from Macon County because we put it into a pot. That Macon County did not receive no tax dollars that was took out of Macon County and sent to other counties. That's what this money's from. This money was taken from Macon County and sent to other counties, and it was put into a pot of money. So this is our only opportunity to get any of that money back. That's what this money is. So I think it's a good idea to give the community building. It services the veterans, it services the community, everything from kids to veterans. You can't have a more cross section of people, and of course the population. The vast majority of the population is in the county seat. So, what do you need, a motion?
Yes.
So I make a motion. We let the county manager apply for this money, and if successful.
Or no, it would be signing the contract. We've got
an agreement.
You got an agreement, so let
Approve
the county manager enter into a contract to hopefully get this $100,000 from the state and apply that to the Carpenter building, thereby releasing, putting back $100,000 into our general fund and do that as soon as possible, Mr. Chairman. This form of a motion.
A motion and a second.
Could we add to that, subject to the review of legal counsel? I know that Chester, we had discussed.
Chester's going to review it regardless.
And
You
looked-
don't need that in a motion.
Looked at the other agreement, but since it's been revised.
Lori and I are already ahead of you.
Yeah.
She's gonna email it to me.
Good deal, good deal.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
There you go. All right, discussion of landscaping at the Robert C. Carpenter Community Building. Mr. Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you'll recall, at our last board meeting, we had some proposals that were brought forth for landscaping, and Commissioner Tate, you observed that, hey, we're comparing apples to oranges here. It would be great if we had a landscape architect come in and look at this, where we could have a uniform design to be sent out to all prospective bidders, that we know we'd be getting a quality product, and we knew that everyone would be bidding on the same thing. We have since done that. We have contracted with Mr. Henry Ross of Ross Landscape Architecture. Mr. Ross has provided us with a drawing, which I have here, and I'll pass out to you right now. This is the landscaping plan that has
Make it
been
no smaller.
will be sent out to prospective bidders for the landscaping at the Robert C. Carpenter building.
You can't see that, Jimmy.
Sure. Wear contacts.
You see it, it's just out of focus.
And with that being said, I communicated with Mr. Ross, and I think Mr. Ross might have communicated with Commissioner Tate to make sure everything added up and was in line. And so, in doing that, we've came up with this plan, and it will be sent to the prospective bidders, who will return their bids September the 20th.
So, do you want, I guess we got two options. One is that we can wait until the October meeting and then approve the lowest prospective bid. If you think there's any reason to speed it up by 2 weeks, Derek, we can probably move this to you forward. Is there a reason to speed it up by 2 weeks?
I think that what we've discussed is we have a couple things going on. We have the Veterans Stand Down that's going to be held at the Robert C. Carpenter Building on October 5th. We're currently, as you know, we've had some weather that has delayed the paving, the start of the paving. This has again, of course, with the hurricane or tropical storm, has delayed the paving once again. So right now we're in discussions with the paving contractor, Bryson's, that if the paving cannot be completed prior to October the 5th, to postpone the paving until after that stand down on October 5th. Right now, Tom, the building, substantial completion. We're working through the punch list. That's right now in the final stages.
3 of the disciplines have still got punch list items to complete. Two of them have complete theirs.
So that's where we're at in terms of the building.
So when will that be done, Tom, do you think? Everything, in the building part?
End of the week, probably.
So the building's going to be good to go. The landscaping, I communicated with Mr. Ross, and he felt like, as quick as we could get this available and get it moving would be great. Again, we'll have those bids back September 20th, and they could begin working September 20th and get as much. He felt like, if they can't get the entire job done, maybe work with that contractor to get ground cover placed in the areas where the landscaping will be. So if we're able to get the paving done and get the landscaping started, it's just going to move the project that further along. So if, with the landscape architect that's been working with us, that has put together the bids for us, once we receive these, if he reviews those bids and sees that, the landscaping that has been proposed is in line with his plan and is good enough to give a go-ahead on that, if the board, it's definitely up to you guys if you want to authorize me to work with that landscape architect to go through those bids and enter into a contract with the lowest responsible bidder that the landscape architect says is good with that he's good with these plans, it conforms to them, then I can certainly go ahead and do that with the intent of moving that along as quickly as possible without having to wait until our next meeting.
I think that'd be fine with one caveat, if you'd let the chairman be a part of that.
Yes,
I believe he does. He's sort of familiar with this kind
He's
of
done
business.
one or two of them, I believe.
A couple of them.
You like the plan, Jimmy?
I'm fine with it.
The funds would come out of fund balance.
No, the funds would be, our paving bid came back less than expected. We have access funds there, and in moving that $100,000 to the Robert C. Carpenter building, there would be no need to appropriate fund balance, which brings me to the point, we also need to approve Budget Amendment 49, which would move those $100,000. So if the board wants to go through with that and take action to approve Budget Amendment 49, and also authorize me to enter into a contract with the landscape architect, or with the landscaper.
Contractor.
How many bids do we have to have?
It's informal.
I think this
informal bid.
all presupposes that the bids come in the informal range. If they should come in the formal range, which I don't think that can happen,
Do you have a
we'll have to go back to the drawing board.
Do you have a suspect here, Jimmy?
We sent it out to the original people that
The contractors that originally
bid it, plus one additional, and contacted me about bidding on it. But was there any others? I'm not aware.
I'm not aware either.
Do you have an idea about where it's going to come in at?
I do.
Where it should come in at?
Less than the original bids.
Okay.
I would project. But
If that's
And I think
if that's
those
the
were in the
case.
informal range.
Yes, they were.
Yeah, they were. So what do you need? Greg?
First, to kind of backtrack, if the board could make a motion to approve Budget Amendment 49, and then if we could do that one first, then we'll do this one next.
I make a motion that we approve Budget Amendment 49.
Second.
any further discussion on the budget amendment? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Then the second one would be authorize me as county manager to enter into a landscaping contract with the lowest responsible bidder.
So moved.
Motion on that. Got a motion?
Second.
Got a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 5-0 vote, Mr. Ducker.
And somebody got to explain to me what an octo-lucan laurel is.
Evergreen laurel that blooms white and grow to 3 to 5 feet.
It's a what?
It's tough.
Poison oak,
All right, moving on. Item 10C, update on Macon Jackson County line issue. Mr. Westall, welcome. Thank you. I'm going to give just a refresh everyone's memory on this. God, it seems like last year, but several years ago when I first became a commissioner, I had an individual in Highlands come to me that had, these are round numbers, these are government numbers, so let's just say he had 10 acres of land from a professional registered surveyor, had 10 acres. He was getting a tax bill because his property was split, half in Macon, half in Jackson County. He was getting billed for 11 acres, even though he only had 10 acres per the survey, because the Jackson County and the Macon County lines were overlapping and both were claiming property that he owned. So we started looking into it, and our GIS analyst at that time, I guess this was 5 years ago, started looking at comparing Macon County's, where we claim the county line is, compared to Jackson County, and it literally looked like a double helix the way it goes. And this is these properties that it affects are on a ridge line, and it's some of the most valuable property in both Macon and Jackson County when it comes to assessed tax value on a per acreage basis. At the time, our county manager, Mr. Jack Horton, suggested that we get the state to intervene and come in. Well, 5 years later, we finally get something back from the state. So I'm excited to see this and kind of see how it flows in the conversation. Once we get this from Mr. Hall, I'll talk a little bit more about my conversation, or I'll give my thoughts on where we go from here, or potentially go from here, and how we handle it, and the problems that we need to address between the two counties. So welcome again. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks everyone for taking time to look at this. I was kind of introduced to this. I came on with the county about 4 years ago, so it is kind of new to me, but we've been doing some valuable work here, working collectively with Macon County Tax Office and Jackson County, as far as the North Carolina Geodetic Survey, who was taking the initiative to take all this field evidence, 2005 LIDAR data, NCDOT maps, and along with backdating deeds to collaborate to get a preliminary line that you see in the maps that's been provided. I'm going to be very brief, and I'll let Commissioner Tate take back over, but we're still working on this. We're still working to get some numbers about revenue changes and acreage changes also. But as far as like putting this into our GIS data and pushing out some hard numbers, we're still calculating that as of today. But I've spoken, talked with, and worked with Kevin Ford from the tax office, and it looks right now that as far as acreage changes and revenue changes, there's not going to be that significant of an amount of change. But I would like you to take these maps and in your own time, take them and review them. If you have any questions, please, feel free to contact me or come by, and we can produce some aerial imagery. I know there are several properties along. If you look at map 1 of 5 on your first page, a lot of those structures, as far as like EMS taxes, those will not change. We already have an agreement with Jackson County, even though the structures are within Jackson County, they get EMS services from Macon County. So yeah, we're still working to produce some accurate calculated figures. That's an extensive process, and working with Ron Harding from the state, and he sent me these maps that they came up with, and we were able to take the data and place it inside our maps with our software. So that's been an ongoing process. So
Wes, looks like the state's showing 3 lines. A county line derived from field located evidence, a county line derived from ridge line per 2005 LIDAR, and a county line derived from NCDOT maps. Is there one that they're saying is correct, or are they averaging the 3, or what are they?
And when I want to bring you back a map when they kind of consolidated this, they have pushed me one line as far as a shape file in ArcMap, which is the mapping software we use. That is a mixture of all the lines collaborative together. In one area, it may use a NCDOT map. In another area, they may have field located evidence as far as a property marker or the old county boundary as per locus post. So yeah, they have pushed that to me, but it's still in the preliminary stages. So I think talking with Ron Harding from the state, we're eventually going to have to come to an agreement between counties with you all in Jackson County. But it's good to see that we have a third-party unbiased source trying to establish the county boundaries. So and get back to your question, we do have a one line. It's just not represented on this map. This is a preliminary map showing the 4 or They have 4 or 5 different possibilities of county boundaries. So,
Do they, in the next step in the process, will they provide us with a final, like when they say, when we have to agree upon something and Jackson County has to agree upon it, what is the next step after the preliminary?
the next step is you all will need to review it with any questions and concerns, whether it's financial or jurisdictional, whatever. And I will get you all a map with the single line. That's a preliminary county boundary, but this map is sent and provided for you all to, if you have questions or concerns about, any land disputes. And like I said, I'll be working to get you all that map, and that way we can review it and go over it. So.
Well, this is it. Your understanding on the proposed, I'm on map 2, sheet 2, I guess. On the placement of the new monuments, is this changing the property? Is this changing the boundary lines? Where they going to put the new monuments? Is this actually changing the boundary lines?
Well, it would be subjected to what's called the boundary line now, because Jackson County, like Commissioner Tate was saying, on a certain property, has their boundary coming within Macon County's boundaries. So we have, in certain areas, we have 3 different boundaries. And
To establish
it's going to be, yes, to
So it
establish.
changes the boundary line.
It will change in several places.
All those monuments on there are monuments that they've located on the ground.
Well, but it's got, the red ones are the proposed
Right,
monument
right.
locations.
And blue is the,
The blue ones are the ones that they found,
So
and the red ones are the
proposed-
proposed new monuments.
Yeah, the proposed monuments could also reflect descriptions within deeds, property deeds of a monument that should have existed there maybe as early, the early 1900s, that may no longer be there because it's rotten or been removed. So.
The calls that's on this map represent what?
The calls in the table, the line table,
Yeah.
on page 2. Okay, so if you look, and I know the writing is very small, but if you can find L9, which is in the bottom right-hand corner of the map, where the first monument is, at the Macon-Jackson boundary, if you look at the bottom right-hand corner of the map, L9, it goes L9, L10. Those are bearing and distance calls for that have been from previous surveys, or just land descriptions or deed descriptions. So that way you would be able to locate those property lines and boundaries. So,
and it looks like all of them are all the calls that are referenced are between found monuments.
yes, according to this map for this
No.
section of the
It is.
the county, it is. And as far as in the technical research aspect, I've not gotten in touch with them as far as their exact process of how they come up. I know they've used deeds and old plats and try to go back, but as far as the exact process, I don't know exactly how they do that.
At the end of the day,
No, but it gets us closer.
Yeah.
at the end of the day, is this worth it? Or the money we're gonna have to put into this, because I see a lawsuit somewhere. Somewhere this is gonna be put in there that you want this done.
Oh, here, you need to hang on to my next statement.
Okay.
Yeah, when we go to there, and while we're doing this.
All right,
So,
I'll back off.
but then we need to talk about that, though.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Okay.
I know for us, as far as talking with the tax department, there's been several concerns on revenue and stuff like that, but and these maps, again, are just preliminary. There's nothing set in stone on them. This is just being evidence to push towards an established county boundary, instead of saying, well, me and so-and-so walked back here 20 years ago when we decided that the county boundary lines are along the top of that cliff. This is trying to use field-located evidence, land description deeds, calls, and everything like that. So,
I think this is an indication that they've got a tough task out there, and not an exact science, and so they're pulling together as much evidence which would be suggestive of where this line should be together as possible, and doing the best they can with what they got to work with.
I think you're right.
The intent of the survey, though, is to take the original description of the county boundary and place it on the ground.
And I guess both parties agree to it. There can't be a lawsuit.
I'm gonna have to look at that. I've not been asked to look into this. I hadn't really worked on it, but I don't know what authority the counties do or don't have, or whether that's something the state of North Carolina will have to do for the counties, quite candidly.
My understanding was that if both, Chester, when we first started this, that if both counties came to agreement that, okay, here's the line, then the state would basically just rubber stamp it and say, okay, y'all are in agreement, we're in agreement. So.
That's correct from what I've also heard as well.
All right, thank you. Any other questions?
I just want to mention, sorry, Commissioner, just one more thing that, this, like Mr. Jones was saying, as far as this, having a survey would cost the county so much money that,
It's a bit prohibitive.
I mean, neither county's probably, it's kind of been kicked out the door. I mean, that's the only technically accurate way to produce the county boundaries, but the state has took the initiative to pour in the research and try to get this thing nailed down. So.
Right.
Just one question, Wes, on 4 or 5, where it shows Jackson. This is going up K Mountain. Where's Gold City at here?
So you see the Silver Road, see where the Silver Road label is there? That would be very close. I'm not sure exactly which parcel is represented there that would be.
Because it runs through Watauga Vista too. This property line, I'm starting a house right there. It runs, half the house sits in, half of it, half sits in Jackson County.
So, so the Silver Road runs through here. So that would probably be that Gold City tract right there, that big elongated.
With the hump in it?
I would assume, the best of my knowledge. Probably right here, see where Silver Road runs through here, just north of the Silver Road there. I would assume that would be the.
Okay, thank you.
To the best of my knowledge.
Mr. Chairman, if you'd like, I can work with Wes whenever he and Kevin finish those computations and get that map with one line and email all that information to the board.
I'm good with that if the board is in agreement. So.
Move along.
All right, thank you, Wes.
Thank you all.
Here's why it's important, and this is why Jack Horton was persistent upon knowing where the line is before we get into the next line of conversations. The next line of conversations, and I'm going to use this very broadly. Let's look at Highlands Falls Country Club. Highlands Falls Country Club in Highlands. They have one entrance into the club, gated community, one entrance in. Half of that club is in Jackson County. Half of it's in Macon County. But the only way you can get in and out of that club is through Macon County. Guess who provides all the trash service to all those Jackson County residents? Macon County. We still do to this day. Guess who provides 911 service? When they dial 911, it comes to our offices here in Franklin. We dispatch our ambulance, our fire services, our sheriff's department. We go there. Guess who provides all the recreational opportunities? We do. So Jackson County, on all these very, very, very high dollar residents, I think it was crazy. It was $600 million.
Oh yeah, it was.
Dollars that we came up with. It was a lot of money on these residences that Macon County is providing all the services for, but Jackson County is collecting all the tax revenue on. So it's not only Highlands Falls Country Club, it's Cullosage Club, it's the entire Sagey Woods Bowery area. It's a lot of Wildcat. And the reason that it's really strange, Commissioner Shields, is they're landlocked. Backside of Highlands Falls, when you can't go anymore, it's Forest Service. Backside of Cullosage Club, Forest Service. Backside of the Bowery Road area. So we have them landlocked. They have these little islands of land that you can get to only through Macon County. So to get to Bowery, for example, you come from Cashers, you drive all the way to Highlands, go down Horse Cove Road, take a left on Bowery to get back into this Jackson County property, because there's no other way to get to it, except by air helicopter maybe. So again, here we are, Macon County is providing the services to all these residences, Jackson County is collecting money. So Jack Horton was pretty persistent upon the idea that, okay, let's determine where the county line is, let's let Macon and Jackson County, then we'll start talking about how we handle these services. The right thing to do, Jackson County will laugh at me, but in my opinion, just from a completely omniscient point of view, the right thing to do is for Jackson County ought to compensate us, number one, or they ought to give us those properties and put the county line at the Forest Service, since we provide everything anyway. Let's just collect the taxes and take care of them. But y'all all know, I can see the grins out there, that's not going to happen. So, and I don't know if I'm going to throw this out there.
Local agreement may be very plausible.
But something needs to happen.
Yeah.
So.
They give us some money. Didn't they give us some money?
A few years ago, they give us some to go to the Highlands Fire Department, because the Highlands Fire Department they raised a little greater stink than I did to.
But
so
it was very minute compared to the overall.
But also changed their insurance ratings when all of a sudden Highlands Fire Department serviced them versus Cashers. So there was some community uproar over that too. But there's a lot of services that Macon County provides as well. That
If this county is providing services to Jackson County, I think it's a highly appropriate topic for an interlocal.
Right. I agree.
Thank you.
Just got to have that conversation. Any questions on that? Thank you, sir.
Appreciate your work, Wes.
Thank you, Wes.
All right, broadband committee update.
If I could, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Shields. I think that what the broadband committee has most recently discussed in our meeting was the recommendation, and if you'll recall, the broadband committee summary report that handed out contained a host of recommendations, and I think the second one on that list was during the course of our broadband committee meetings. We had some individuals that were involved in the wireless internet provider industry in Jackson County come in. I think we have even discussed it among the board here and talked about how that the telecommunications ordinance in Jackson County kind of gave them the flexibility to be able to provide that service. And you know, in looking at it and evaluating it, the broadband committee felt that the planning board, who has just reviewed our telecommunications towers ordinance, they've done an excellent job. I know that they worked extensively with Mr. Jones to be sure that that ordinance was in compliance with all the applicable regulations from the FCC or FAA and all those various regulating agencies. A lot of time, a lot of hard work from a very competent planning board has went into that ordinance. And in saying that, you know, we felt like that if anybody was versed and had the capability and the know-how to look at assessing the feasibility of, you know, maybe putting some special conditions in there for wireless provisions for wireless internet provision in Macon County. If anybody needed to be looking at that, it needed to be the planning board rather than the broadband committee. They've already put much time and effort into it, and we felt like that was the place that it needed to be. You know, Mr. Shields, if you want to.
Mr. Jack Morgan had the information from Jackson County on how that they worked with I'm going to call it a smaller business person versus a larger business. And I think what I'd like for this board to do is to have that to go back to the planning board and look at to see the feasibility of making exceptions for the small business person versus a large business person. Now that gets to be a little, when you start making exceptions for the little person, and what's going to happen when the big person comes in wants the same fee exceptions and things like that. And we felt like, Carl, at the planning board, go back and look at this And if what you've got, we're looking at it from a fairness issue, but sometimes that won't happen, but just because it's a small business versus a large business, you have to be careful when you're trying to give compensations to the small business just because they're small. And we felt like that the planning board should look at this again, talk about it, and bring it back. And we may not have a large difference there, but Jackson County does. And there's some things that within their ordinance that the planning board just needs to look at it again and see if it's feasible.
And to add to that, there's things that basically Jackson County's ordinance, like our current telecommunications towers ordinance, whenever you have a telecommunications tower company that wants to come in here and put a tower up, you've got to go through a public hearing process with the Jackson County Board of Commissioners. In some instances, when telecommunications towers come into Jackson County, they're subject to an administrative review process based on that telecommunications tower. If the purpose of that is to provide wireless internet, then that is subject to an administrative review process rather than the public hearing process. And I think that it's handled at the administrative level, and that's just one of the examples from the Jackson County ordinance. I feel like that our ordinance in a lot of places is less stringent than a Jackson County ordinance. Jackson County's telecommunications towers ordinance is 38 pages long. Ours is 14. Again, I'll go back to the planning board did an excellent job of cleaning that ordinance up, coming from somebody that used to enforce that ordinance, as I did for 4 years, in cleaning that up and getting it where it needs to be. And we thought that if there's any room, or there's anything that the telecommunications towers ordinance can do to potentially further the expansion of wireless internet in Macon County, that the planning board needs to be the ones to look at that and make that call.
I think that you bring a valid point. If anybody needs to look at it, it needs to be the planning board. A little bit of history on the Macon County ordinance. I can't speak for all the members of the planning board, but I think I'd be safe in saying we thoroughly examined Jackson counties. We were very familiar with Jackson County as we were with their basically Buncombe County West. And there's certainly a different process to go through in Jackson County. What Macon County's intent was is, in lieu of an administrative review, we just exempted those, which was what we tried to do. And when you look at the cost of the towers, based solely on what's in those two ordinances, I think that it reflects that it's substantially cheaper to build a tower in Macon County. What Jackson County did was, for this one individual, is not the planning board, not through an ordinance, but the Jackson County Commissioners voted to exempt that person from those fees. Right. So that was handled at the county commissioner level, not through the ordinance. But so I think it's important that we understand that. Whether we're working with somebody great big or somebody small, I think we need to, like everybody on this board, we need to put forth as much effort as possible for broadband deployment. So if this board wants to task the planning board with reviewing that, I'm sure that they'd be more than happy to review that. And I think there was at one point there was actually a spreadsheet that kind of went through the different ordinances and hit the pros and cons of all of the ordinances from Buncombe County West when we were developing that, to try to make sure that we felt like that we had perhaps an ordinance that was not user-friendly prior to that, and our goal was to fulfill, what the planning board's charter is, and if we could do that and make our ordinance as effective and as easy to use as possible, that's kind of what our goal was. That's why it went from the number of pages it was to where it's at. So,
I think the gist of the committee, the broadband committee, felt like what we're talking about here is let's look at this thing one more time to see if there's a little tweak, and there may not be. But I wasn't aware that y'all had already reviewed the Jackson County. Mr. Morton was there with us, and he shared a lot of stuff. But I felt like the total group was, you have a heart for the little man versus the big man, and it may be easier for the big man to come up with a fee. It's harder for the little man to come up with a fee and make a profit quickly. Yeah. And that was their concern.
One of the things that the planning board heard over and over again, and I think the commission at the time heard, was Macon County is a county that has a lot of outdoor activities. We have an Appalachian Trail, we have a lot of hiking and things of that nature, and there was a lot of concerns in regards to that. So we took that into consideration, or the planning board took that into consideration when they developed that, and to try to protect those areas, and to be able to deploy specifically wireless broadband, and still be able to protect basically the scenery.
Mr. Cave, you were in that meeting. Anything you want to add to this?
I think just information. I mean, just any information I think would be that, that the planning board had went over that we could use would be great. We just didn't want to, the committee didn't want to infringe upon the planning board that has put the research and the hard work in, and just because, we'd heard say, hey, this is how Jackson County's doing it, so we need to do that. That wasn't what we wanted to do. We wanted to back up and take a few steps back and look at the big picture.
I think when we think about broadband, wireless broadband in particular, and the development of the 5G network and the parameters in which that 5G network is going to have to be deployed, it's going to substantially impact the number of towers. So I think we need to keep that in mind, and the state, whether they move forward or not, there's certainly a lot of talk at the state level about the deployment of a 5G network. So I think as we certainly want to encourage the deployment of broadband, but I think we need to keep in mind what the potential is of that 5G deployment.
So I don't know if it's just agreement that we let the planning board go back and look at this, or if you have to put it in a motion or to move something, what we're talking
I think
about.
just a consensus or a motion.
I think it actually would be helpful to the planning board for there to be a motion that clearly defines what you want them to do. I think without that, they sometimes struggle a little bit about precisely what is it the county wants us to do.
Is that what the committee recommended, Mr. Shields?
You have it on your...
Yes, and maybe,
The more specific that you could be with that would be.
It'll help
right.
them along.
And I think it, probably wouldn't hurt to have the, maybe a joint meeting with the planning board and the broadband committee, that we could get a lot of these questions asked and look over the information that the planning board's gathered. I think what the motion is,
Mr. If I got to interrupt you just
Yes,
a
sir.
sec, if it would be very beneficial if this board could provide just a shopping list of what their expectations are, what they want them to review, then that would help the planning board stay on track.
That may be in this motion.
And I think, basically, and without, without getting into, what we have here is just to assess the feasibility of revisions to the telecommunications towers ordinance, which would create, or which would further the build-out of wireless internet in Macon County.
That's awesome.
But, and I know that's kind of broad, but basically just to look at the feasibility. Is it feasible? Why it's not feasible? And that might be in just sharing information that you guys have already vetted and went through, that you've came to the decisions to do what you did the first time. It just might be an information sharing. Just look at the feasibility of is it feasible to change or make further revisions to the wireless telecommunications towers ordinance that would promote wireless internet expansion in
I
Macon
think
County?
that's great. I think that's part of it.
Yes.
I think that gives them something to answer to.
Because we can ask.
I agree.
Question.
I mean, I think that's narrow enough
Questions.
that they would know what to do and broad enough that they could
To work with it.
Mr. Shields seems to think that it's a good idea to put the two together. The two commitment makes perfectly good sense. To put the committee together and the planning board together.
Yeah.
Carl,
Do
exactly.
the question and answer thing, because, this is a learning experience.
I think it actually would be helpful to the planning board. I think they were a little concerned they may not have had all the expertise and whatnot to deal with the broadband issue. But if that committee that's working with it comes
And they've got a lot of
brings their
information
knowledge,
since
it's
then.
bound to help.
So I think that would all be, and I'll set up administratively, I'll set that meeting up. We'll just call our broadband committee meeting, which is very informal, and we'll just meet with the planning board in the near
And
future.
then I think that group would also be in a position to provide any clarification that the planning board might need as to the task.
Since Keith Conover in that loop.
Yeah.
Mr. Conover also would be a part of this information.
I was going to recommend that if there's any way he could be a part of that, I think it would probably give your planning board a jump start.
So again, I think the motion would be to assess the feasibility of.
do you need a motion for that? I mean,
Yeah, I think that they were asking so the planning board would have a clear direction. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think if you want them to make this a priority, I think you need to tell them that you want this to be first priority if that's what you want. Because I think they've got some other things they're working on
I mean,
right now.
he's liaison on the planning board,
Right.
and you're liaison with so it's up to you two to, I mean,
And I think when you bring those two together along with Keith, Mr. Conover, you had another player here this evening, Sarah Thompson, and it's important when you talk about priority that it moves real quick, because when they're dealing with monies and grants and stuff, you can miss the boat.
But if you don't tell the planning board
Right.
this is a priority, your first priority or your second priority, it's going to probably go to the bottom of the pile.
And so I guess what I hear Ms. Rowland saying is that we'll put together a meeting together with the planning board that involves Mr. Conover. I think he's had some.
Does he come from Raleigh or where does he come from? Asheville.
Asheville. He's been out of the loop due to some medical things within his family. And then this storm probably, his father lives in Florida, and I think there were some medical issues. Now this storm has come through there, so he's been out of the loop. I haven't been able to talk to him in a couple of weeks.
Carl mentioned 5G, and from what I'm reading, that may well be the future. And I bet Mr. Conover could add a lot to that discussion.
so you're gonna make the.
Is that okay? So are we in a motion or just an agreement?
Bring them to have the next planning board meeting.
But that'll be Thursday night, and you and I won't be there.
Next planning board meeting.
Or if it needs to be done sooner, the planning board can always recess and take that issue up.
But it'd give us time to connect. If we wait till October, it'd give us time to connect with Mr. Conover. We don't know where he's at in the loop. due to his situation.
Need a motion?
If you can make that into a motion, I'll make that into a motion.
I'll go ahead and deliver that task from the board and let them have that at their meeting Thursday, and they can begin thinking about it and preparing for that meeting in October.
Okay. I'll make that into a motion that we continue this conversation and requested that the planning board review this information, and also for us to, the broadband committee with Mr. Conover, to be a part of this conversation in October, at the October planning board meeting.
And that's a priority that's the priority for the plan.
Right.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Good. Thank you. Next item, consideration of mobility manager position for Macon County Transit. Transit Director Kim Angel. I think it's going to be fed in by video. Hey, Kim.
There's Kim.
Can you hear us?
She's coming in by cell phone.
Sure. All right, Kim, I've got you on now. We're trying to read something to work tonight, sorry.
You got us, Kim?
Say something, Kim.
Good evening.
Okay.
Hello? The floor is yours.
I believe she can see us, but I heard him say that.
You want to try sign language?
You need on our broadband committee.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yay. So I wanted to say thank you so much for letting me miss the meeting in a sense without physically being there.
Next time, John.
This ain't gonna work, folks.
No, it ain't gonna work.
I
We
can
can do better than this.
You can take
tell
it.
Kim off.
There we go. Too much background noise in my place here.
Where's Cheryl? Bernadette?
There you go. She's
Okay.
in now.
So thank you guys. I did want to let you know why I'm not there. I'm not sure. I think I may have mentioned it to Derek. But as you're aware, we converted to the biofuel propane system on our vehicles, and we were nominated for an award by the Propane Education and Research Center out of Washington, D.C. for going green and cost savings. And so we are here to receive that award tomorrow morning. So just wanted to share that information with you.
That's great.
So I think the first item on the agenda is the mobility manager position, and I'm just going to talk, and then I will, believe it or not, shut up, and if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. This was an application that I brought to you guys last year in October, and we had discussed this, that Macon County was going to apply, but this is going to be a shared position called a mobility manager position. So we did finally get awarded that grant. Contract became available in July. It's about a $50,000 grant with a 10% match, which is about $5,000. And we're only going to be responsible for half of that because this position will be shared with Plain Transit. So our share is about $2,500. And that is already in my current budget. $2,500 matching. One of the issues that we discussed in making a new position, making a permanent position, and I'm going to discuss this with Derek and Lori at length, is that we will be posting this position as a grant-funded position. Therefore, as long as we receive the funding for this position, we will keep it. If for some reason in the future we do not get funded for this position, then obviously the position will be eliminated. And
just to hit some highlights of the reason that we need this position in the department. First and foremost is the promotion of regional coordination. This person will work for Macon County and Swain Transit, but they'll also help to promote the regional line coordination efforts that you're very well aware that we work with Clay County, Jackson County, and Swain County on a regular basis for that coordination, especially for those out-of-county destinations. This person is also going to help assist riders. They'll work with healthcare agencies, social service agencies, and businesses to help all of those understand public transportation, how to use it, when we're available, what the benefits are, and by being able to have somebody who can work with individuals and agencies, we feel like this is going to result in increased operating efficiency because we're going to be putting more people on those existing routes that we have. What we plan to also is to have this person develop and implement a marketing and advertising and customer relations program. And we also expect this person to be responsible for certain areas of compliance for federal regulations. Our compliance for state, especially for federal regulations, well, and for state as well, over the last probably 2 to 3 years have just grown immensely compared to what they were 10 years ago when I was doing the same job. So those are those reasons. So that is the position that we're asking for. And like I promised, I will shut up and I will let you ask questions if you feel the need.
Thanks, Kim.
Motion to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Got a motion to approve in a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Number 2.
Awesome, thank you. I appreciate that. The second item on the agenda is a discussion about a facility expansion. And this is kind of coming to you at a late hour, and I apologize for that. But really had no control.
Hold on just a minute, Kim.
Okay.
What we got to do, Lori?
We need a budget amendment for $50,968 to establish the line items and establish the revenue lines. When she said she had it in her budget, she was just talking about her $2,500 match.
Oh.
Because the grant itself is not within the county budget. So if you could just amend your
So I'll amend that motion to include the line item as described by the finance director, Mr. Chairman.
$50,968.
$50,968.
Is that good, Commissioner Shields?
No, the attorney has his hand up.
Kim, did I understand this would be a shared position with Swain County?
It will be.
Has there been discussion of an appropriate interlocal agreement for that shared employee?
We have discussed that there will need to be one chapter.
Okay.
But we obviously I would think the position itself was approved. So that I think I'll be in touch.
Okay, I'll wait for you to be in touch.
Absolutely, which we'll probably do too.
Thank you.
I'll second.
You good with the second?
All right.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye. Now go, Kim.
Awesome. Thank you, Lori. I did forget to ask for that part. Kind of important, but I did forget. So let's move on to the facility expansion. If you have been to my facility in the last 3 or 4 years, you are probably well aware that we no longer have a conference or training room. With expansion and growth has come the need for more office space, so we took our conference and training room and turned it into the operations supervisor and scheduler's office. Very small space for drivers to have any room in where we're putting out their information as well. So we did get the opportunity about 2 weeks ago. NCDOT is applying for some federal money. And what they're doing is a statewide application. They're including Macon County as part of this statewide application for other projects other transit that are looking to either expand or build a new facility. So they did one grant application. They sent it to me actually on the 21st of August, and they were submitting 2 FTA on the 25th. So it was a pretty quick turnaround time. Asked for information. They asked, we actually had some work done 3 or 4 years ago that was just a rough estimate of what we would like to do in the building. We submitted that. And it was about $183,500 was approximately the amount for the expansion. And that would include is a new conference and training room and potentially a second story with some office and storage space. So they asked that we include a letter of support either from our governing board or the county manager saying that this project was supported locally. And since it was before and after a meeting, so in between meetings, what I asked Eric to do, and I think there's a copy in your agenda packet, was just to send a letter of support. And obviously it wasn't a letter of commitment.
Kim, if you could, could I just explain something real quick? If you'll look in your agenda packet, the letter she's referring to, again, the turnaround time, she received this on August the 21st. The turnaround time was August the 25th. So, again, very quick turnaround time. However, it was an opportunity to hopefully receive these funds. I would like you to take note in the letter, the closing paragraph that I put. Thank you for your consideration in funding this much-needed project. Again, this letter is in no way intended to represent an endorsement or commitment by the Macon County Board of Commissioners for this project. Such commitment or endorsement can only be given following a formal vote of the board, which is scheduled to take place on September 12th, 2017. So I put that caveat in there and did not want you to think for 1 second that I was speaking on behalf of this board. I made it very clear in this letter that that is not what I was doing.
I missed the totals too, Derek. I couldn't understand her.
About 100, right at 183,000 for
Expansion.
for the total expansion. It requires a 10%, $18,300 match, and as Kim will tell you right now, she would have those funds from the sale of surplus vehicles. So it would be.
With the replacement of so many vehicles last year, we were fortunate enough.
She has the money now.
Get some funding that's required by the state goes back in our budget. So, and I was figuring it up just a little bit ago. There's about $19,000 of that money at this point. So, given that if it comes in at a 10% match, then we'll be good to go.
Do you have plans, Kim?
I'm sorry?
Do you have plans, a blueprint?
I have some rough drawings. So, before this could even happen, I'm sure I would ask for a feasibility study to be done, and they kept putting me off at DOT and telling me they would do it later, and of course, then the opportunity for funding came up, and they had no choice but to go ahead and put this in. So it may be that a feasibility study has to be done before. Everything's a little murky right now. Really, the only thing that I'm asking for at this point is if for some reason if this funding comes through, would the board be willing to support that, given this $19,000 that I have in my budget?
Not to exceed that? Is that what you're asking? This board to do not to exceed the 19,000?
And again, the cost estimate I had was about 3 or 4 years old, but it was the most recent that I had. And one of the questions was, is this project scalable? So I'm even willing, if I can get my conference and training room to scale back if I have to on that additional office and storage space, as long as we can have the conference and training room, because we are just in a situation where we really don't have the room that we need.
I know a little bit about that building.
You're going to have some architectural service.
I say I know a little bit about the building you're in now.
You know a little bit about it, and like I said, you've seen it lately, and I certainly invite you to stop by. You can tell we are cramming things in corners around there. Never expected in 20 years we would grow, in less than 20 years, that we would grow and exceed the space that we got when we built this facility.
So, Mr. Manager, you're looking for a motion not to exceed 19, I think we can't, not to exceed $19,000 of commitment.
You know, I would just, I think what we're doing is this project, we would be saying that we support this project, and if you wanted to go that one step farther, we support this project up until the point that transit has the
funds,
has the
10% match.
has the funds to cover the 10% match. I think that
Is that affordable?
I mean, if you don't have no plans, you don't know. I mean,
Okay.
four-year-old plan.
No interlocal agreement.
I built that
But
building.
if the project's scalable and you're getting the money, you're getting 10 cents on the dollar, and she's got the money from the transit vehicles she sold. I mean, if
You can't beat that deal.
I mean, it's not free money, that money, you know, I mean, that's
it's
still.
taxes too, yeah, but
These items like this, should that be in the future part of our capital
and
improvement plan?
this would be part of our capital improvement plan, except in our capital improvement plan, that just like there's an area for the expenditures of a project, there's an area on that project form for potential revenues. And this would influence, I guarantee it would influence that project's ranking, because, hey, this project's $190,000, but it only cost us $19,000, and Kim has that $19,000 from the sale of surplus vehicles. So that would make that project very attractive to be a project that's first on the list, higher on the list, because it's got the revenue to cover itself.
And when you didn't know that money was coming.
Yeah.
You didn't know it was going to be available.
Right.
So, and they do need the room. I'm sort of concerned about, you know, the total cost of the whole thing. If they don't know.
And one thing, you know, obviously,
Supported up
it's
to
not guaranteed. It's going to depend on whether they may pick 3 of the state's projects out. If the state will pick 5, they may only pick 3 and some 3. I did get an email over the weekend that they're also going for a Tiger grant. So it may be that they're looking at 2 different pots of money, so it may improve our chances. But again, there's no guarantee this will happen.
Well, you always do really good at that, Kim.
Right. We just want to be ready to go if it does.
Yeah, understood. So I make a motion, Mr. Chairman, that we give you the authorization to write the approval of the letter requesting these funds, that we approve up to the 10% match of the 10% match of all that the transit can afford. Is that right?
We're approving the project up to the point that transit has the
Ability to
available
pay the matching
pay
funds.
the 10% match.
Yeah. I'm put that in form of a motion.
All right, we have a motion on the floor.
I second it.
We got a second. Any further discussion or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, Kim. Safe travels.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank
Kim.
you. I appreciate it.
All right.
Congratulations on your award.
Thank you.
It's a big organization.
Yeah,
They're everywhere.
they're everywhere. You think we could just take like 1 minute?
All right, Warren.
Words like, no, don't.
Come on up, Warren. You've been patient.
He didn't sleep none, so we'll.
This'll be-
Since you didn't sleep none last night,
Didn't have anything to do with it.
since you was up all night, Warren.
Mr. Chairman, I'm here tonight to ask for the approval of the revised fire district map for Burntown Fire and Rescue. This reflects the new substation on Iowa Church Road. Our folks did inspect those folks, take a look at their stuff on September 6th. They did meet all the current stipulations from North Carolina Office of State Fire Marshal to be considered a substation. And you remember that's important for folks who live within that 5-mile district area that we talked about last month. This particular facility will will move 169 parcels and 126 structures within that 5-mile response area of their facilities, additional facilities. And basically tonight, your approval will allow us to submit this revised map to the North Carolina Office of State Fire Marshal so they can come up and conduct their final inspection on their facility and give them final approval for substation. I made them the same size that you like.
Okay, this is for the insurance rating.
Yes, that's
Is that
correct. That's correct.
Question on that, if you got, these two, Cowee and the new Burntown are not 5 miles apart?
Yes. They don't have to be 5 miles apart. That particular district can expand up to 5 miles.
But is there overlap? I mean, if people in the Burningtown district, if the Burningtown Fire Department's not there, you got the KIA district.
There would be, yes.
So you get the same fire rating, I mean, you get the same insurance?
You get the insurance rating for the department in which district you're included. So yes, to answer your question, if you were closer to a department, if you were, for instance, 2 miles to a department that has for instance, a Class 6 rating, and you were farther away from a department that has a Class 7 rating, whichever circle you're within, whichever insurance district you're within is the rating that you'll receive. It doesn't matter if you're closest, it's whichever one that you're actually included in.
So you could be closer to a fire station and have a higher rate.
That's correct.
But you don't get credit for that on your insurance?
I can't speak for all insurance companies because I'm sure that there may be some, but under general principle with the insurance service organization and the underwriters for the insurance companies, it is supposed to be whichever circle you're within.
How many parcels will this bring in?
Currently, and we're not changing any of the response area for them. This is just the internal insurance district markings for the district that they currently have. We're not changing any of the response area. With the addition of the substation, pending a lower rating on Burningtown Fire Department, they currently have a Class 8B. You have a 9, which is the basic entry level. You have an 8B, which they got certified on about 2 years ago. Some insurance companies will give a break for that, some of them won't. This would allow, if they were to receive that break on the 8B, 169 extra parcels and 126 structures would receive the benefit of that 8B.
And the benefit is the lower rate on the insurance.
And again, this is just our Macon County Board of Commissioners and Macon County's request to have the North Carolina Office of State Fire Marshal come in and conduct the actual inspection on the substation without changing any of the exterior response area.
And you second.
Motion and a second by Commissioner Gillespie. All in favor?
Aye.
Sorry, Ronnie.
Thanks, Warren.
Oh, you were going to say something, I'm sorry.
No. No, that's fine. I just want to ask Warren if that's he approved of it, so.
He can't read it.
But he didn't sleep none, so he don't know.
In recess now.
Just we got these folks here, they need to go.
Sitting out here all night.
Yeah,
Consideration of retaining Electon County status for temporary assistance to needy families.
Wallet card.
DSS Director, Mr. Patrick Betancourt, welcome.
Some wallet.
Ronnie, we're gonna start getting
Wallet.
wallet size.
Forms to carry.
I was holding like this, realize it's upside down.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be very quick. This is a request for the commissioners to vote to continue our electing county status. Macon County's continuously participated as a electing county for North Carolina's temporary assistance to needy families. You know that in North Carolina, we refer to that as the Work First program. We've been an electing county for Work First program since 1998. We're only one of 7 electing counties, including Beaufort, Caldwell, Catawba, Lincoln, Lenore, and Wilson. Electing county status grants us additional latitude above the regular policies that apply to the other 93 counties that would place requirements or program expectations on participants before they can receive any of that financial assistance. Those expectations might be that they have a different application process that they have to undergo, a more stringent application process. They might be required to go out and do job search requirements that other counties don't make their participants subject to. Any of the unspent financial assistance that's allocated to this Work First block grant as a result of not giving participants financial assistance. That money gets to get reinvested back into our child welfare services, which includes our TANF-eligible foster children, as well as it allows us to provide emergency assistance for any TANF or Work First eligible families. This ability to reinvest the unspent funds has offset county costs of services while increasing the responsibility of accountability for participants. And again, we've been doing this since 1998, but the North Carolina Division of Social Services requires a county commission vote to continue that electing status. Just a reminder that TANF or Work First is not an entitlement program, so the electing counties can place those additional work accountability requirements on recipients, ensuring that they become more work ready and that they're being responsible and accountable citizens before they receive any kind of financial benefits. Many of the county requirements that have been established by these electing counties since 1998 are now actually standard electing county policies. So it becomes sort of a pilot program by the electing counties that the state then turns around and adopts. So we've had to become much more innovative about how we look at maintaining that electing status by consistently improving our innovative approaches. One example is that we now count all of we used to be able to, in electing counties, used to be able to count all of the income of all household members to determine any kind of eligibility. At some point, the state said, yeah, that sounds like a really good idea. We think we'll apply that across the board to all 100 counties. So in addition to the application and screening procedures, job search requirements remain a part of the practices that we require of anybody who comes in and applies. And at the current time, there are only 7 active cases in Macon County. All of those are what we would call a child-only case, which is where a child goes to live with a relative, a specified relative who is not their biological parent, and that relative rather is unable to work, and then so there's some very minimal assistance that those relatives, as they're providing care, typically in the grandchild, that those grandparents can receive for the care of that child. So again, I would ask the commissioners I would ask you to make a vote on continuing us as an electing county, and if you need an example of that $183,000 that we bring in every year as an electing county, Budget Amendment 47 is in your packet that shows that electing cash. I'd also entertain any questions, and I've asked Sheila Conley, the Work First Supervisor for Macon County, as well as Kathy Makinson, the Business Officer of Macon County DSS. If you have any questions, I've brought them.
Mr. Chairman, I'd gladly make this motion. We think every county should be elected county. I was chairman of the board when Sheila and all of us worked to become an electing county. We got sued. Didn't we, Chester?
Yes, I worked on that.
Yes, you did. And it was a long process through 2000, 2001, 2002. And we should be very proud to be an electing county and what it stands for and how it works. And a lot of those things that we were sued for is now the state is doing across the state. 3 of those things for sure. And so we should be proud to be an electing county in the way it's handled, and the money that it saved, the umpteen millions that it saved across this state, Patrick.
Yes,
and so I make that motion that we proudly vote to remain electing county in Macon County.
Second. A motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Good. Thank you, Patrick.
Thanks for your patience.
Yes, sir. My pleasure.
Sheila, thank you. We ought to do that again sometime.
Okay, thank you.
Proclamation for Constitution Week.
Motion to approve.
A motion on the floor.
Who brought the proclamation for?
The proclamation that you'll see included is just declaring September the 17th through the 23rd Constitution Week in Macon County. And I'd also like to give you an update on our monuments outside the courthouse. As you can see, the tarp's been over them because of the rain has came. They're finishing, putting the final touches on those, putting the documents in there, as well as the covering. And we don't know yet whether or not that will be finished by September 17th, but we do know that Charters of Freedom is working diligently to get that done. And
This is in conjunction with that. This is
yes,
the tie-in.
just thought it would be good to, hopefully we'll have that monument complete and
Ribbon cut.
the ribbon cutting, although a date has not been set for that ribbon cutting yet. But just to, as you walk by the monument, and if the board declares September 17th through 23rd Constitution Week, just remember what that means and how much, how heavily we've shown that we support that.
Sorry.
All in favor?
Aye.
Satisfaction of security instrument, Mr. Jones.
Yes, I was contacted by Mr. John Fay, Housing Program. As you know, there are housing programs that require recipients to execute a deed of trust or mortgage on their property for the funds that they receive for housing improvements. That is the case with Ms. Marlene Wall. By the terms of the note and deed of trust, she has now satisfied those terms, as Mr. Fay has related that to me in an email from him. He has indicated that she has met the requirements of the program to be excused and have this lien released at this particular point in time. The board has to do that. Without the board's approval, it can't be done.
So move it, Chairman.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
The consent agenda.
Motion approved.
Second.
Consent agenda with the removal of number 49. Motion to approve by Commissioner Higgins, second by Commissioner Bill. All in favor?
Aye.
Appointments, Board of Health, 2 seats, physician and engineer. I think the physician is Dr. Julie Farrow from Highlands, and the engineer, I'm trying to get there, I can't recall.
Mitchell Bishop.
Mitchell Bishop.
DOT engineer?
DOT.
We've got a motion to approve the 2 individuals.
So moved. Second.
Motion and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Discussion regarding a community funding pool. Mr. Manager, can you give us a quick update on that and what's
Yeah.
going on? When do we normally, and include in this, when we normally get a recommendation from them?
The recommendations, Mike, when are those recommendations normally come in?
Normally about this time of year.
I know that last year we approved them at our November 12th meeting. We actually approved the community funding pool recommendations that they provided to the board. Again, that was at our meeting in November. We have some vacancies on the community funding pool, and I think that ties back to what we're seeing with how long it's taken us to fill these Board of Health seats. A lot of the boards and committees, it's just getting harder and harder to find volunteers. The same we've heard from representatives with the volunteer fire departments. And it's, as the times change, I guess that's just something that changes with it, the way things used to be. It just gets harder and harder to find the volunteers. These vacancies have been advertised. Like all vacancies with our boards and positions, we've had a active advertisement on our county website for quite some time now. I know Mike spoke with Karen Wallace multiple times now regarding these vacancies, and I think that we need to just let see what all that these, like the community funding pool, what steps they've taken to actively encourage and grow that membership, and I guess be a resource and help in any way we can. But we have not received any applications for those vacancies, and part of that came as a board motion to begin advertising on the website.
So do we need to move forward, or are there enough members on that board present to make these recommendations, or do we need to fill this board before they can make a recommendation? Or
We, of course, got to have a quorum, and I think they've had some quorum issues. So I think you certainly are going to need to be sensitive to that.
And I can communicate, and Mike, I'll have him.
Can you, I'm just going to make this request because I think it would be good. Can you send us all, the commissioners, a list of maybe even the media too, if they're interested, a list of what the qualifications are to be on that board. And then I don't mind at all trying to rally whoever I need to serve their community, do their tour of duty.
I can tell real quickly, if you, just in addition, just to get it out there a little faster, if you'd like, Mr. Chairman, I can go over those very quickly. The community funding pool is to be, and this came from back in 2000 when it was established. The community funding pool has a 12-member board. Members serve on a 3-year rotating basis. The community funding pool members are comprised of the following. 2/3 of the members represent nonprofits, with the following nonprofits each having 1 member. You have to have 1 member from the Macon County Community Foundation, 1 member from the Macon Program for Progress, 1 member from the Peggy Crosby Center, 1 member from the Volunteer Council of Franklin. The other third of that 2/3 are just made up of nonprofits. So while those 4 were listed specifically, you have to have 4 other members from 4 other nonprofits, and then 1/3. So you have to have 4 that represent the community at large. They don't necessarily have to be affiliated with a nonprofit. So there's your 12 members. Again, 4 from those named, 4 from any other nonprofit, and 4 from the community at large, plus, of course, the 2 commissioner liaisons. So that is the...
Who are the liaisons to that?
Paul and I.
You and Paul.
We never
met yet. Yeah. Well, right now is when we should be meeting.
Yeah, and I have a question about the concept of a funding pool. How did it come? You were here, Ronnie. I mean,
It started.
I'm not one that
Well, the
supports
funding
taking
pool
tax
started
dollars.
because what would happen is they would come. These nonprofits. It was really to take the pressure off this board. If you don't know the fact, because they would all come to individual commissioners, and this way it comes to this pool, and it's a fair process. It wouldn't be fair if Kids Place came to Mr. Shields, and then some other group comes to me, and then comes to you, and all of us individually. It's hard to say no when a nonprofit comes that does good community, because all these people that apply does great stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
And so this funding pool sorts through that and tries to, if it's a community clinic or Kids Place or whoever it might be. So this funding pool was created to vet those folks, some of them that really didn't qualify, and they said perimeters of what those qualifications were. And so that was to vet that and then bring it before the board. This is their recommendations, and we usually always approve their recommendations because they really do. It's hard work. This committee, it's hard work for this committee, and that's the reason it was done.
Yeah.
And it's really worked well.
Is the shortfall in the nonprofit, 8 nonprofit members, or the 4 large members, or both?
I don't know that.
There's a shortfall everywhere. I think that, but however, I do know that in looking at the expiration dates in some of the terms of the members that have just failed to come back for reappointment, or failed to seek out reappointment. However, I think if I'm not mistaken, Mike, those that expired before they met last year also.
Yes.
And so, in the absence of coming in and being reappointed, the process that was used by the funding pool last year, it should be no different than this year. The terms have expired, the members are continuing to act in that capacity. So, but we do need to get, Mike will get with Karen Wallace and work that out to get those housekeeping items cleaned up, see who needs to be reappointed, ask Karen, what steps that board's taken to recruit and bring recommendations for members to the Board of Commissioners, and any way that our office can assist her with that, we'll certainly do that.
If you can email that to us.
So it serves
The requirements.
The requirements, then we'll
They
see
serve
who
a
we can rally to
great. They
get there.
serve a great purpose.
Okay.
I believe our town has a funding pool, just like the county does.
That's right.
Yeah,
It serves a great purpose.
yeah, I appreciate all the nonprofits, but I don't support taking tax dollars and allocating it to a certain. I don't think that's our purpose.
Next item is possible, let's see there, we got 2 items. I got one I know for Chester, attorney-client privilege. There's one for Commissioner Higgin too, potentially under what reasoning? Same reason, attorney-client privilege?
Well, I think actually, the statutory reference there is to
143.
instruct agents or representatives of the county as to terms or negotiating for the purchase of real property or property.
We buying or selling?
Well, I'm going to have to defer to Mr. Higdon on that as to whether it's a purchase or a sale. The purpose for the closed session can only be used when we are purchasing property, not when we are selling property.
All right, I'm getting a motion to go into closed session.
Motion.
And a motion and a second, all in favor?
Right.